This is Dennis Callan in Avignon. This is one of the most beautiful cities in France. It's loaded with historic monuments, especially the great Palace of the Popes. At a certain time in the 14th century, Avignon became the home to the popes. They left the Vatican in Rome and relocated to Avignon. And this was the golden period of the city, when the great palaces were built, great mansions were built. A wall was built around the town at that time in the 14th century, and the wall still stands today, as do all of the great palaces. The Palace of the Pope especially is considered the largest Gothic palace in all of Europe. So it's definitely a must-see when you come to Avignon. And also, the little back streets are certainly part of the charm, like you find in any great European town. They're going to be cobblestone lanes and lined with shops, a lot of trees and benches. You can sit down and rest, cafes always. And we're going to take you on a tour of the main highlights, as well as some of those little back streets of the great city of Avignon. Home to 9 popes during the 14th century and one of the most beautiful cities in France today, Avignon is a treasure house of palaces, museums, and meandering lanes, surrounded by an old fortified wall that still protects it from modernization. That's one of the beauties of a walled town in Europe. Not only did it protect the town from bandits and invaders during the Middle Ages, but in the 20th and 21st centuries, it's continued protecting these historic centers from modernization. And so within the wall of Avignon, you have a nicely preserved old town, and yet at the same time, modern shops that are quite up to date and very hip people. Avignon lies on the left bank of the River Rhône at the foot of a rock that's 190 feet high, on whose south slope are the old Palace of the Popes and the cathedral. Avignon became a thriving colony under the Romans, but retains hardly a trace of their buildings. Its greatest period was from 1309 to 1377, during which time it was the residence of several popes, from Clement V to Gregory XI, and had a population at that time of 80,000, making it a very large city. Papal nuncios resided here down to 1791, although the Great Schism of the mid-14th century was resolved by 1377 when the popes returned to Rome. Avignon was next to France in the late 18th century. The medieval wall, or the ramparts, are 3 miles in length and were built in 1350 to 1368 by Pope Innocent VI and Pope Urban V. They were altered in 1489, and they have since been restored. They present a very interesting example of medieval fortification. There were once 10 gates, but several have been demolished, leaving just a few gates remaining for us to enter through today. There are 39 towers and battlements along the walls. The best preserved part of the walls is near the Porte Saint-Lazare. This city, in the heart of beautiful Provence, lays claim to dozens of historic monuments, especially the great Palace of the Popes, which was gradually enlarged into an imposing fortification during the 60-year papal residency, where you had those 9 different popes living here. And it's now a museum open to the public. Begin your orientation of Avignon with a look at the 2 main squares in the center of town, the Place de l'Horloge, surrounded by cafes and bistros, and the adjacent Place du Palais, containing the city's most important and historic structure, the Palace of the Popes. This UNESCO World Heritage Site is considered the largest Gothic palace in all of Europe, and a priority place to see in Avignon, although its original furniture is gone and the cavernous rooms are mostly empty. The popes left the Vatican in Rome for political reasons and lived in Avignon from 1316 until 1377. the city's golden period during which great mansions were built, money flowed in, the wall was constructed around the town for protection. This was a time of wild growth with massive wealth coming in via the church, some from every manner of rowdy foreigners who could pay their way into the city, much like the modern invasion of tourists. There's also a wine shop inside the palace, and if you choose not to pay admission to go to see the palace, by all means go into the wine shop and the gift shop, because their admission is free, and sometimes they have selected wine tastings in the wine bar, and it's a very good place to purchase wine. And while you're in the wine bar and gift shop, you have access to several of the very large rooms inside the palace on your way to use the toilet facilities. So by all means, take advantage. One of the most spectacular rooms that you can see inside the palace is the Hall of the Audience, with its Gothic vaulting and massive stone pillars. This large room could hold as many as 600 people. It's one of the reasons why the Palace of the Popes is in the top 10 places in all of France for the visitor, with nearly 700,000 visitors per year. The Palace of the Popes, with its massive battlements and lofty walls 13 feet thick, is more of a castle than a palace. It was built on various plans in 1335 through 1365. When you go out the back door of the palace, you'll end up in the old neighborhood where ancient Romans first established their town 2,000 years ago. That's right, Avignon was founded by the Romans, as were many of the great cities of Europe. Notice the simple Roman ruins on the right side of the small square. And that's about all that's left in Avignon from the ancient Roman structures. Greeks were at this site before the Romans, and simpler prehistoric tribes, of course, lived here even earlier. We're continuing our look at Avignon. It's the principal city of Provence in the south of France. We'll be showing you some of the historic sites in this episode: churches, museum, the wall around town. The pedestrian shopping district extends for 10 blocks south. Energetic types might opt for a 10-block circular stroll through some of these quiet back alleys toward the small 14th century church of Saint-Pierre and over to busy Rue Carnot, and then walk back to the palace on Rue de la Croix. Return to the Place du Palais along an ancient lane adjacent to the palace, the Rue Pérollerie, dramatically carved into the bedrock. It's like you're walking through a natural canyon. And you'll find yourself coming back and forth through this dramatic tunnel-like pathway several times in your visit, as it connects several important parts of town. On the northern end of Palace Square, you'll spot the fortress-like Petit Palais, built in 1318 as a mansion in the medieval style with Gothic pointed arches and an interior courtyard. Now a museum, it houses a collection of 300 medieval paintings, including the masterpiece of Botticelli's Madonna and Child. You'll find that the main thrill is simply walking through this delightful mansion, once home to Julius II before he became Pope. He was the famous Pope who hired Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and was also a great warrior leader Pope who expanded the powers of the Vatican throughout Europe. You might also stop inside the nearby Cathedral Notre Dame des Doms, the town's major surviving Romanesque structure. Walk a few minutes north from the Place du Palais into a lovely public park called the Rocher des Doms, resting on the top of a small hill overlooking the old town. From the ramparts, take in the beautiful views across the rooftops of the city and across the Rhone River. You'll also spot the romantic castle of Saint-André in the distance, and the famous half-bridge, the Pont Saint-Benazet, your next destination. You'll notice the Park of the Dome also has a beautiful fountain with a statue in the middle, and it's a great place for families to hang out. The kids show up here, they can pedal around in rented pedal vehicles, even a little horse and buggy with pedals to get by. And there's the cotton candy sales lady who's really dishing up some sweet treats for these kids. All in all, this park is a bit of a hideaway. You wouldn't notice it if you were just walking around in the shopping lanes of Avignon. You don't even really see it when you're at the Palace of the Popes. But it's there on the hill, just right next to the palace, so don't miss it. The view, the benches, the fountain, the statues, it's a great ensemble. And it's easy to walk down from here, down that little zigzag ramp. There's no escalators, no elevators, so you've got to do it on your own power. Coming down will bring you to the Pont Saint-Benazet, Avignon's legendary bridge built in the late 12th century, and another UNESCO World Heritage Site. Don't bother paying admission to walk on the bridge, since you can see it well from the riverbank, unless you want to dance on it, as in the famous 15th century children's song. On the bridge of Avignon, everyone is dancing. This was the only bridge across the lower Rhone River when built, connecting the kingdoms of France and Germany, and thereby turning Avignon into an important trading center. Even though it only goes halfway across the river now, because it was just broken down and collapsed in earlier centuries and not fully repaired, the bridge just makes a great sight. We're continuing our look at Avignon in Provence in the south of France. We're going to take you into some of the main shopping streets, the main boulevard, little side streets. It's got a variety of old historic lanes as well as some very modern places to see in Avignon. Enter the Porte de Rhone gate through the town wall, then turn right and you'll walk along a picturesque old lane with old houses from the 15th century. Turn right again, then left to Place Crillon, site of an excellent hotel you might consider for your visit, the Hotel d'Europe. This is 4-star deluxe, but has some moderately priced rooms, especially in the off-season, when prices could be half as much as during the summer high season. With many fine hotels in all price ranges and the strategic location, Avignon makes an excellent home base for visiting this Provençal region. Another hotel you might consider is the Mercure. It's right in the heart of town, just between the bridge and the main square, and it's a very comfortable 3-star hotel, part of the vast Accor chain of French hotels. And we found it was a very nice place, very clean, very modern, very friendly. A few blocks over, you'll find Rue Joseph Vernet, one of the main shopping streets of Avignon. It's got boutiques and galleries. And here's another fine hotel deal. It's the Hotel Mignon. It's just 1 star, but it's a chic property and very affordable in a nice neighborhood with galleries and such along Rue Joseph Vernet. It's quite easy to find the Rue Joseph Vernet because it's just a few blocks to the west of the main shopping street of town, the Rue de la République. And yet, many visitors might simply overlook this because it's not in the main tourist track of the historic monuments of Avignon. So be sure to get over a couple blocks to enjoy this lovely street. At the lower end, it's a little wider. It's got a lane for parking and 1 lane for through traffic. But for the most part, it's only 1 lane with wide sidewalks. Makes it a very pedestrian-friendly neighborhood. The street is named after one of the most famous painters of Avignon, Joseph Vernet, who worked during the 18th century, noted for his seascapes. Now, this street is really at its best late in the day and early twilight, when you have that magical combination of street lights, shop fronts busy, people out walking, and lingering twilight in the sky. Travelers are generally busy throughout every day, so don't worry exactly what time to get here, but make it a point to find this street. It's good throughout the day. The shops stay open. Some close in the mid-afternoon for a brief siesta. We're still in the south of Europe, after all. In the morning, it's a lot quieter. So if you're out here at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, this main street really has a different character, a different quality than later in the day. And at night, it stays quite lively. It's a very safe spot, 10 o'clock, even 11 o'clock at night. Of course, the shops will be closed usually by about 8 o'clock, but the restaurants and the cafes and the bars are open. So be sure to pay several visits to this wonderful Rue Joseph Vernet. Be sure to walk a few blocks up and down Rue Saint-Agricole, a classic side street which offers a delightfully similar environment of pleasant shops and leads to the main square of town, the Place de l'Horloge. The map shows you how these lively neighborhoods in the center of Avignon are very close together. You've got those main streets of Vernet and Agricole right next to the Place de l'Horloge. This is one of the most interesting parts of town. The very popular Place de l'Horloge has many cafes all around it and a mix of restaurants that range in quality from simple bistro to fine dining. And there's also a colorful carousel that's usually in operation here. And by now it's probably time to pick an appealing spot for dinner. Complete your first day with a stroll along the main street of Avignon, that Rue de la République, which extends through the center from the train station nearly to the Pope's Palace in a straight line about 1 mile long. Lined with modern shops and various quality restaurants, it is the town center's busiest street. There are some restaurants and fast food choices along this broad artery, but wait until you get back to the main square, the Place de l'Horloge, before deciding where to dine. Of course, there are other dining places scattered throughout town, a bit less tourist-oriented than those in this main square, but locals eat here too. A perfect meal is the ideal way to end your day. And what's the best way to see Avignon? You should consider a walking tour. You can do this on your own, using your own instincts, or using the map, using the brochures, or use a local guide. And now we're going to show you a mix of scenes, some from our walking tour with a local guide from our visit, and others just meandering around on our own, to give you a good overview of how you too can walk through the center of Avignon. Avignon's Old Town is a charming neighborhood of shopping lanes and narrow residential streets with little back alleys perfect for strolling. Some of these routes are exclusively for pedestrians. No cars allowed, especially in the shopping center just southeast of the Place de l'Horloge. It's like one big shopping mall. And this historic center can easily be seen on foot in one day, for it is a compact zone about 1/2 mile wide and about a 1/2 mile long. The curved shape of these streets will keep you guessing what's around the bend, what's coming up next, or which monument or museum will you see around the next bend in the road. The streets are level. You don't have to worry about hills here in the center of the old town. And they're just riddled with little plazas and fountains with trees, some benches, and of course numerous cafes. While this neighborhood is very old, the shops and galleries are up to date with modern interiors and contemporary European items for sale. Be sure to visit the Tourist Information Office and get their useful map that provides 4 walking routes to follow while you're exploring the city. This free map is one of the better travel brochures you will ever come across. The Tourist Bureau has put colored arrows on the sidewalks here and there, coordinated with the map to help keep you on track. The first day's walk already covered some of its suggestions, but you'll find plenty left to keep you busy for the rest of today. At first, this walking zone will seem vast and disorienting. There's a lot of tangled, twisted corners and angles, but this is actually just a few blocks of lovely shops that you would enjoy again later in the afternoon for some further serious browsing. Find your way to Rue des Marchands and then past the synagogue to Place P. Place P is a relatively large tree-lined square surrounded by quaint buildings and cafes. Place P is a nice outdoor plaza that would be easily overlooked by the casual visitor to Avignon. It's not really at the top of any postcard shots or lists of things to visit in town, but you see, it's a very lovely spot. The covered food market of Les Halles was created in the 1800s. You see here today the modern market hall. It was built in the 1970s with a very interesting living green wall on the outside. You can pass through the indoor food market, Les Halles, emerging on the south end at Rue Bonneterie, which turns into one of the most picturesque streets in town.
Rue des Teinturiers.
The Street of the Tinters. Several ancient water wheels along this cobble lane are still turning, pushed along by a quaint little tree-lined canal. These wheels were once used to provide power for the manufacturing and dyeing of textiles and printing and a few other industrial applications. It was the beginnings of the industrial age. Now this is a trendy street with cafes, boutiques, and a small theater, and it's a mere 10-minute walk from the town center. You might want to come back again for another look at twilight when it takes on a different atmosphere. And of course, that's when the restaurants will be really coming to life. This street is the kind of place you just want to drop anchor for a while and hang out, sit down on a bench, lean up against the wall, relax, watch these water wheels. Of course, the wheels are no longer functioning to power any equipment, obviously, in this modern age.
Good for decoration.
They're here mostly as historical landmarks and for your entertainment. So take advantage. It becomes very hypnotic to just stand watching these wheels go round and round. We're starting this Avignon episode along Rue de Lys in the heart of the old town. Stroll back along Rue de Lys, feeling free to meander left or right as the spirit moves you. Those little side lanes are very appealing. Notice the large 4-story building with the arcaded windows. This has quite a history. It's about 400 years old, and it's gone through a variety of purposes, starting out as a home for monks and then a home for poor people. There was a barracks for soldiers at one point, and now it's a modern luxury apartment building. Rue de Lys passes one of the more charming little plazas in town, the Place de Coursant, with its burbling fountain, and there's a picturesque little church of the Celestines, and there's a bar of the same name. There's a lively array of cafe tables that are spread out here in fair weather. Around the corner we come upon Rue Frédéric Mistral, which is a short lane that passes under a picturesque arch that connects two historic buildings. The street's name honors one of the great literary and culture heroes of Provence, Frédéric Mistral, a writer who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1904 and was a great advocate for the independence of Provence. This leads into the main and busiest street of Avignon, Rue de la République. It's a straight road that was cut through in the mid-1800s. It's a grand boulevard, really, with lovely wide sidewalks, terrific department stores, restaurants, fast food, fine cuisine, wine shops, clothing stores. It's really the retail center of Avignon. Part of it is lined by a lovely tree tunnel It leads from the main train station straight through town to the Place de l'Horloge, one of the main squares. Next, you'll continue a few blocks north to another church worth visiting, Saint Didier, one of the largest Gothic churches in Provence. The ancient collegiate church of Saint Didier was rebuilt in 1358, and if you enter into it, you'll find that it contains some arcades and a little Gothic pulpit in stone. In the Place Principale, just northeast of the Saint Didier Church, is the old Chapel of the Penitents. It was founded in 930 but rebuilt in the 15th century, and it contains some valuable paintings inside. Continue a block north from the church into Avignon's main pedestrian zone, lined with shops. A maze of several blocks ideal for wandering. And this will lead you back to that main Place de l'Horloge and put you in prime position for lunch or a snack or whatever meal happens to be appropriate for you at this time. Of course, you'll always have a variety of choices. You could try Afro-Cuban. There's all sorts of cuisines, not only French food in Avignon. Maybe a crepe and a salad, that's a nice light meal, or kebab on the main street. Rue de la République, there's a variety of fast food. But French cuisine, when given the choice and opportunity, and why not enjoy some fine French food? There's some big department stores like Monoprix, Fnac, and H&M. And you've got street music. Pop in for a bottle of wine for takeout, maybe have a picnic back in your hotel room. This time of day, twilight is just perfect for walking. Maybe sitting at a sidewalk cafe and watching the people. It's probably not a time when you want to sit down inside a restaurant and lose the lighting. This is just beautiful to be out on the streets at this hour. Twilight, you've got shop lights, the evening light, the street lights are on, and the shop windows are all lit up. There's a whole variety of great things to purchase here in Avignon, ranging from souvenirs such as the Provençal fabrics and pottery, or some jewelry, clothing, you name it. They've got everything. It's like one gigantic shopping mall in the pedestrianized streets of Old Town Avignon. One of Avignon's major museums is an art museum called the Musée Calvet, and is located in the lower section of Rue Joseph Vernet. The museum is set in a magnificent 18th century mansion with collections of fine art and decorative pieces from the 15th through the 20th centuries. You'll find excellent paintings in here representing most of the important phases of art history. Usually, each great painter is represented by one fine piece. On the ground floor, you'll find Roman antiquities. Notice in particular the very fine and detailed painting by Jan Bruegel the Elder. And you'll also find paintings from the 19th century by Géricault, Corot, enamel metals, ivories, Egyptian, Greek, and Roman antiquities. The list goes on in this lovely Museum Calvet. And there's an archaeological branch of this museum called the Musée Lapidaire, which displays sculpture from ancient Greece, Rome, and Egypt inside the chapel of a former Jesuit church at number 27 Rue de la République, just a few blocks away. You can just stand in that front door and peek at the stone carvings and decorative arts before deciding whether to pay for a closer look. Paintings from the 19th and 20th centuries are on display at another excellent small museum, the Musée Angladon, with masterpieces by Degas, Manet, Sisley, Van Gogh, Cézanne, Picasso, and Modigliani, among others. These main museums should be enough for most visitors and could keep you busy most of the afternoon, leading right into the cocktail hour and another fine meal. Another dozen smaller museums, archives, libraries, and historic homes are open to the public, so one could actually spend another full day in pursuit of all the culture offered here in Avignon. Well, let's have a look at Avignon at nighttime, just after sunset, and then we'll continue on in this segment and take a stroll at sunrise in Avignon. Dusk and dawn, through the gates of the old town, the medieval fortified wall, passing the Hotel d'Europe, a beautiful place to stay, a 4-star property right in the heart of the old town, up Rue Joseph Vernet, of one of the main shopping streets, onto the Rue de la République. This is the busiest street of town. And in the evening, the side streets are also lovely, such as Rue des Teinturiers. It's the old street with the paddle wheels that powered the dyeing industry, the tinters, teinturiers, hundreds of years ago. It's very safe to walk around in these little streets in the evening. Of course, you want to take normal precautions. You don't walk around with lots of money, and you want to just, watch out for yourself, but you don't have to worry. Feel free to stroll in the evening. Perfectly fine. The main street stays busy right through the evening. Most shops will be closing by 8 p.m., but on the Rue de la République, it's going to be open. Then in the morning, you might get up before breakfast and take a stroll. Sure, why not? There's a special lighting. There's not many people out at this hour at about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. It feels like you can have the city almost to yourself. It's certainly a good way to escape the crowds if that's your interest. Take a sunrise stroll in these little back streets. Obviously, shops are not open at this hour, but you will find a few food markets opening up already at sunrise. And you'll run into the odd cafe that's serving a little coffee to help wake you up on your early morning stroll. It's a very peaceful time of day. People are out walking their dogs. You might hear some birds chirping. A few cars are out. But by and large, even on the main street, on the Rue de la République, there's really not much going on. It's pretty empty. Well, you've worked up an appetite anyway, and perhaps it's a good time to head on back over to your hotel. Our breakfast room was in a cloister. This is the Hôtel Cloître Saint-Louis, a beautiful hotel dating back to the 15th century. It was a Jesuit institution. It was a church, and there's a cloister. There was a school here, and now it's a very comfortable hotel. Our group enjoying a lovely buffet breakfast, a chance to chat with each other in the morning, make our plans for the day. And this is a fairly special day because today we are leaving Avignon. We've been here for 3 days, really enjoyed the visit, wonderful city. But now it's time to move along to our next destination. And this hotel is just near the city wall, so it's very convenient. You can walk from here just a few blocks over to the train station or to the major bus terminal. Hop in your vehicle and off you go.